And welcome to another episode of the Rojas Media podcast. I've been into baseball since pretty much since I was 4 or 5 years old, and ever since I could apparently imitate every single batting stance from every single terrible Phillies teams in the late '90s, in the early 2000s. That being Marlon Anderson, Rico Bronya, Mike Lieberthal, you name it. I've been in baseball since I was a little kid, and I've been obsessed with it when I was in elementary, middle school, whatever. And I was super into baseball cards and just watching the Phillies. Albert Pujols was my favorite player growing up, and I was always so fascinated with baseball stats, just looking at stats on the back of baseball cards. Watching ESPN, watching Baseball Tonight, just baseball stats always fascinated me. And I got a book about a year ago now, and actually my mother got it for me. Not gonna hide that. She got me a book called The Incredible Baseball Stats, and there are some of the most amazing facts, stats, info for every baseball purist, every Statcast guys, any of the advanced stats people. You'd love this. It's one of my favorite books. Yeah, it's amazing. So today on the podcast, I'm going to bring one of the co-authors of this book. He goes by the name of Kevin Reavy. Kevin, thanks for coming on, man. I appreciate it.
Hey, no problem. Thanks for the kind words about the book. I appreciate that.
For sure, man. So you're one of the co-authors with Ryan Spaeder. The first question I want to know is how did you guys go about collaborating for the book?
Yeah, that's a good question. I mean, it was kind of a happy coincidence. I had written a book with Ryan Startari. He was a sports talk guy in Philly for years, and that was my first book. It was called This Day in Philadelphia Sports, which was just kind of a day-by-day look at things that happened every day in Philadelphia sports history. And after I'd written that, a mutual friend of me and Ryan, I didn't know Ryan at the time, approached me about getting that book as a gift to Ryan because he's, a sports stat and fact freak. So I ended up getting him a book, and I think it took us we kept talking about it, me and this buddy of mine, Rob, for about a month. When can we meet up? I'll get you the book. And every time we talked, he just kept saying, "You got to follow this guy on Twitter, Ryan." And I wasn't on Twitter. I didn't know what the big deal was. I thought it was kind of a joke. And he finally got me to look him up, and I'm like, holy crap, this guy's got a really big following. So, I had to meet him. Once I met Ryan, we went to the local pub. We got a few drinks, started talking baseball, and once you get him going, he doesn't stop. And he's just an encyclopedia for baseball stats and facts. And anyone interested in that kind of stuff, follow him on Twitter at the Ace of Spaeder. And I mean, it was just, that's how it started. Once he got going and I'm listening to him go on these stats just off the top of his head, I knew I had to do something with this guy.
Yeah, I mean, I also want to know because I've been following him for some time now, and he tweets some of the most ridiculous. I don't even know how he finds out some of these stats, but they're absolutely ridiculous. So what was your part in the book? How much of it was you looking up stats? How much of it was him grabbing stuff, researching stuff? What was that process like?
Well, that's what's awesome. I mean, I hadn't actually thought about this until this moment right now, but when we're on the second version now, if we do a third version, we should really do kind of like a prologue to tell that story, because that's a story in and of itself. When we started it out, he was just entering the Marines, and he was, I think, about 25, 26 at the time. It was always kind of his goal and dream to join the military, specifically to join the Marines. And, typically at that age, you're ancient. You're already out of service by that age. But he was determined to do it. And right when we got the contract to do this book, he pretty much had to go, off the grid for 2 months, 2 to 3 months, meaning we could not contact him at all. That was the whole, basic training thing. No emails, no phone calls, just zero contact. So he gave me his entire database of tweets on an Excel spreadsheet, so I could basically look everything up. And he kind of showed me the ropes a little bit about how he, researched things, and I kind of knew a little bit on my own. And really, I was on my own. I mean, I had to, if it wasn't there for me to use his stats, I kind of had to figure it out on my own. So I would say, specifically the first version, I would say probably like the stats and everything, about 75 to 80% of that is him. And I'm just sort of filling in the blanks and the gaps, where I had to find stuff. I looked it up, but a lot of that stuff was him. And the second book, I mean, he was more so, he just got out of the military recently, but he was more available to me this time around. So I would say definitely a bigger, he was able to add a lot more of his own stuff this time around. But yeah, I mean, the way I like to say it is, I'm kind of like the storyteller, and he's just a stat machine. He's a mathematical freak. He comes up with all that kind of stuff, and I just try to weave it into a story.
Yeah, so you're saying that you guys kind of just fit together perfectly.
Yeah, that was the thing. I mean, right off the bat, he didn't really have a writing background, and I did. And I knew that I could kind of use his information and kind of, weave that into something. And that's kind of what I had done before with my previous book with Ryan Spaeder is, using his experience in the media and his, incredible, Philadelphia sports knowledge. I figured between the two of us, we'd be able to make something like that work. And same thing there. I kind of had the writing background that Brian maybe didn't quite have yet at that point in time. But yeah, it's a pretty perfect matchup because, I mean, we were both looking to do something. We just didn't know what. And it couldn't have turned out any better.